You can learn everything about a person by how their dog behaves around them. And when Trooper, an old retired canine with cloudy eyes but perfect instincts, started clawing at the trash can behind the county library, Officer Rachel Morgan knew something was off. Not curious, not cute, not a raccoon or food or anything you'd expect. No, this was something else. Something darker. He wasn't barking like he wanted attention. He was barking like someone had gotten away with something. The park was quiet that evening, the kind of suburban calm that usually puts your soul at ease. Kids had gone home. Streetlights flickered on across Maple Lane. And Rachel, who'd come off shift 2 hours earlier, only meant to take Trooper out for a casual stroll and maybe a coffee from the corner shop. Instead, she was standing 10 feet from a grimy city bin while her dog growled low and steady, like something inside that trash didn't belong. Rachel glanced around. Nobody nearby. Just her and Trooper. She tugged the leash. "Hey, let's go, buddy. It's trash. You don't need to." He didn't budge. Instead, Trooper dug in deeper. His massive paws scratched so hard at the metal it screeched, his nose buried between the flap of the trash lid like he was chasing the scent of a ghost. Rachel's spine prickled. There was something about the way he stood, rigid but focused, like he was working a live crime scene, which made no sense. Trooper had been retired for over 4 years, arthritis in his back legs, cloudy left eye, but instinct? That never retired. Rachel sighed, unlatching the bin. "All right, let's see what's got you spooked." The stink hit her first. Old sandwiches, wet paper, a leaky cup of soda. Then something else. Half buried beneath a layer of greasy wrappers was a hoodie, folded in on itself like it had been shoved in a hurry. Gray, faded, torn at the elbow. But what stopped Rachel's hand cold was the sleeve, darkened with a brown-red smear that wasn't paint. Blood, dried blood. She pulled her phone from her jacket, snapping photos from different angles, then carefully used a pen to lift the hoodie into an evidence bag she always kept in her patrol SUV, even when off-duty. Old habits, she thought. Thank God for them. Trooper gave one final huff and sat beside her, satisfied. And Rachel? Her hands were shaking. Rachel didn't report the hoodie right away. Not to the station, at least. She knew how that would go. "You found a bloody sweatshirt in a public bin? Probably some teen fight or a squirrel bite gone wrong." But Rachel's gut said otherwise. She drove home with Trooper in the back, staring at that evidence bag like it was whispering something she couldn't hear clearly yet. Her mind buzzed with old cases, unsolved reports, that one cold file that haunted her every time she walked past the third-floor archive. April Jensen, 17. Disappeared 9 months ago. Last seen walking near this exact stretch of park. Rachel had combed the woods for hours the week April vanished. No body, no blood, just rumors and desperation. Could this be connected? Could Trooper? Rachel sat in her driveway watching Trooper rest his chin on the seat, calm now, like he'd just done his job again. She smiled at him, soft but uneasy. "You still got it, old boy." The next morning, she logged the hoodie and dropped it off herself at the lab in Oakbridge. 30 minutes east, but worth it for faster processing. She didn't include any theories, just possible evidence recovered at local park, and her badge number. She tried not to think about April's case. She failed. Her brain kept circling back. Why that bin? Why now? Who tossed a bloody hoodie in a trash can behind a library where kids play 4 times a week? Back at the precinct, Rachel didn't say much. She ran her usual shift, took 2 neighbor disputes and 1 shoplifting call. But when the sun dipped again and the town got quiet, she leashed up Trooper and headed for the park, this time with her flashlight, a fresh evidence kit, and a quiet prayer that she was wrong. If you're moved by stories of heroic animals like Trooper, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals, for more real-life tales of courage, instinct, and the unbreakable bond between animals and humans. Trooper didn't lead her to the trash can again. He led her behind the park, near the chain-link fence that separates the town maintenance lot from the trailhead. And then he stopped cold. His ears perked, his body stiffened, and he looked up at Rachel like, "You need to check this out." Rachel swept the area with her flashlight. Just dirt, leaves, old tire marks. She was about to turn back when Trooper suddenly lunged to the right, toward the bushes behind the gas station wall. He began scratching again. Hard. Rachel knelt, heart thudding. She pulled the bramble back and found a partially burned glove, singed black at the fingertips, stuffed between two stones near the drainage ditch. She didn't touch it. Instead, she opened a fresh evidence bag, sealed it, marked the location. Another piece of the puzzle, another secret someone thought they could bury. That night, Rachel pulled out the cold case file. April's last known location was 3 blocks from that trash can. Her last known clothing, jeans, sneakers, and a gray hoodie with a red logo on the front. Rachel hadn't looked at that photo in months. When she did now, her blood ran cold. Same brand, same tear at the elbow. She closed the file slowly. Someone had come back, or someone had never left. And Rachel knew, without question, that it wasn't just a coincidence. Trooper had found more than trash. He'd found a voice that hadn't been heard in 9 months. And whatever story that hoodie was trying to tell, Rachel was going to hear it. The hoodie sat under fluorescent lights in the Oak Bridge crime lab, sealed in a sterile bag and tagged with Rachel's badge number. To anyone else, it might have looked like just another dirty piece of clothing from a city trash can. But to Rachel Morgan, and she suspected to Trooper, it was something much louder. It was the voice of a girl who'd never come home. April Jensen had been gone for 278 days. 17 years old, high school junior, honor roll, starred in the spring play, vanished walking home from her part-time job at the ice cream shop on Cherry Street. No signs of struggle, no solid leads, just a few blurry security cam images, one vague sighting by a man at a gas station, and then silence. Until now. That morning, Rachel skipped breakfast. She couldn't eat. Her mind kept circling the same pattern. What if it's her blood? What if Trooper really found the last thing she wore? What if we're about to open a door that someone worked very hard to close? She poured herself lukewarm coffee at the precinct, nodded at the new rookie officer half-heartedly, then made her way to her desk. Trooper, ever faithful, laid at her feet with his chin on his paws, eyes half closed but ears still twitching whenever someone walked by. The forensics report hadn't come in yet, but Rachel didn't wait. She pulled up April's file again. Photos, interviews, timelines. She spread everything out across her desk, drawing invisible threads. Then she noticed something that hadn't clicked before. The last person who saw April had mentioned she was being followed. A local barista, Becca, told police she'd overheard April saying someone had been watching her walk home the past few days. No name, no vehicle, just a guy in a gray hoodie who always seemed to be across the street. That detail had felt too vague back then. But now, Rachel stared at the hoodie in the lab photo, her stomach tight. What if the hoodie didn't belong to April? What if it belonged to him? Rachel hit the streets again, starting with the alley behind the gas station where Trooper had scratched at the bushes the night before. She canvassed the area, looking for anyone who might have seen something recently. It was a long shot. People didn't remember things from 9 months ago. Hell, most didn't remember what they saw last Tuesday. But Rachel was relentless. Behind the station, an older man, Leroy Mitchell, longtime maintenance worker for the town, was fixing a broken fence. Rachel recognized him from around. A quiet guy with a reputation for noticing things most people missed. "Morning, Leroy," she said. "Mind if I ask you something?" He leaned back, wiping sweat off his brow. "Sure thing, Officer Morgan." She pulled out a photo of April. "Remember this girl?" He squinted. "Yeah, she was on the news a while back. Went missing, right?" "That's right. You work around here much?" "Every Tuesday and Thursday for the last couple years. Why?" Rachel hesitated, then showed him the picture of the hoodie. "Ever seen this before?" Leroy frowned, thinking. "Can't say for sure. Looks like the kind they sell at that surplus shop near the train tracks." Rachel's pulse picked up. "Surplus shop?" "Yeah, Coleman's military outlet. Cheap hoodies, boots, backpacks. The kind of place high school kids and loners hang out." "Thanks, Leroy. That helps more than you know." Rachel pulled up to Coleman's 20 minutes later. The place looked like it hadn't changed since 1993. Faded camo jackets in the window, dusty glass counter full of pocket knives and old lighters. A bell jingled as she stepped inside. Behind the counter stood a thin man with an Army veteran cap, chewing sunflower seeds. His name tag read, Walt. "Help you, officer?" he asked. "I'm looking into something. Recognize this?" Rachel held up the hoodie photo again. Walt leaned in, squinting. "Yeah, that's one of ours." Used to sell them 3 for 20 bucks. Haven't had that brand in stock for a few months, though. Any way to trace who bought one? He snorted. Cash sales. People don't show IDs to buy hoodies, officer. Rachel nodded. Anyone ever give you trouble wearing one like this? He paused. Now that you mention it, there was a guy. Early 20s, skinny, came in all the time asking weird questions about hunting knives and bushcraft gear. Bought those hoodies in bulk. Said he worked in laundry, but he smelled like gas and metal. Creeped out my niece when she was working the counter. I told him not to come back. Do you remember his name? Walt scratched his neck. No, but he drove a rusty red pickup with duct tape on the tail light. That help? More than he knew. Rachel returned to the precinct and pulled up vehicle reports from the area around April's disappearance. She filtered for red pickups with damage citations. One name popped. Evan Cole. She froze. Evan had been interviewed during the original investigation, but he had an alibi. Said he was working at the industrial laundry facility all night, backed by a coworker who vouched for him. Nothing solid had tied him to the case, but now the pieces didn't feel like coincidence. A red truck, a matching hoodie, Trooper reacting to something behind his garage. Rachel opened Evan's file again. He'd lived less than 4 blocks from where April vanished. That evening, Rachel didn't go home. She drove back to the neighborhood near the park, Trooper beside her in the passenger seat, ears perked, tail still. They parked a block away from Evan Cole's residence. Rachel knocked on the door. It took a long time for it to open. Evan looked thinner than his photo, with sunken cheeks and twitchy eyes. His hands had oil stains and small scratches, like he'd been working on something mechanical. Behind him, the smell of gasoline drifted through a cracked window. "Officer," he said with an awkward smile. "Everything okay?" Rachel kept her expression neutral. "Just routine follow-up on a cold case. Got a few questions about the night April Jensen went missing." His smile dropped just slightly. "That again?" "Afraid so." He leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "I already gave my statement." Rachel nodded. "I know, but sometimes things change. People remember things. Evidence resurfaces." Evan's jaw clenched, then relaxed. Trooper stepped forward. He didn't bark, but his posture changed, rigid, alert, nose twitching. Rachel felt it too, a shift in the air. "You mind if I take a look around your shed?" she asked casually. Evan hesitated. "It's a mess, tools and junk, nothing to see." Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. All the same. That night, she didn't get a warrant. She waited, but she had a plan. And she had Trooper. And more importantly, she had instinct. That voice inside her that whispered, "He knows something, he's hiding something. The lab results would come in tomorrow. Maybe it would be enough for a search warrant. Maybe not. But Rachel wasn't going to stop, because the hoodie wasn't just evidence. It was a breadcrumb, and Trooper had just caught the scent. By morning, the lab report came in. Rachel had barely taken a sip of her diner coffee when her phone buzzed with a notification. She opened the report in the quiet corner booth, heart pounding under the warm hum of morning chatter. DNA match confirmed. The dried blood on the hoodie belonged to April Jensen. Rachel sat still for a moment, the clatter of dishes and muffled country music falling away into silence around her. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't just Trooper's instincts or a bad feeling. It was proof. April had bled in that hoodie, and someone had tried to bury it in a trash can behind the library months after her disappearance. Rachel flagged down the waitress for a to-go cup, dropped some bills on the table, and hustled out the door. Back at the precinct, she dropped the report on Captain Murphy's desk. He glanced through it, jaw tightening. "Damn," he muttered. "So she really was—" She was hurt, possibly killed, and someone tried to hide the evidence 9 months later. "Do we have enough for a warrant on Evan Cole?" Rachel shook her head. "Not yet, but we're close, real close." Murphy sighed. "I'll talk to the DA's office. See what we can do. In the meantime, don't push him too hard. We don't want him lawyering up and disappearing." Rachel nodded, though it made her stomach turn. She didn't trust Evan to stay put, not after last night's twitchy eyes and Trooper's silent signal. She needed more. That afternoon, Rachel and Trooper headed back to the woods near the park. Not the main trail, but the part most folks didn't bother with. Overgrown, muddy, and half-forgotten, the trail wound behind old fencing and patches of blackberry bramble. Trooper pulled ahead. His nose was low, movements sharp and focused, just like in the old days. Rachel followed quietly. letting him lead, stepping over branches and ducking under low limbs. The air smelled like wet earth and pine, thick with the damp of recent rain. After 20 minutes of walking, Trooper stopped. He scratched at the base of a mossy log. Once, twice, then again, harder, more urgent. Rachel crouched, pulling her gloves from her coat pocket. Beneath the log, half buried under wet leaves, was a small metal box. She cleared it gently, heart hammering. The lid was rusted, but it opened with a soft creak. Inside, a bracelet made of thin silver chain, engraved with the initials AJ, a photograph torn in half. One side showed April smiling in her school uniform, the other half missing, and a note, scribbled in shaky, rushed handwriting. She shouldn't have fought back. Rachel froze. Her fingers tightened around the plastic evidence bag she was reaching for. This wasn't just a breadcrumb anymore. It was a breadcrumb trail smeared in guilt. Back at the station, she processed everything carefully, logging the coordinates where Trooper found the box. Then she pulled April's full case file and checked again. Had April ever been known to wear a silver bracelet? Yes. Her mother had given her one for her 16th birthday. Rachel called her. The voice on the other end of the line trembled when she answered. Hello? Mrs. Jensen, it's Officer Morgan. I found something today near the park. A pause. Breath caught. Then, is it about April? Rachel nodded slowly, though the woman couldn't see her. Yes, ma'am. We found something we believe belonged to her, a bracelet and a photo. A sob came through the phone, muffled by a hand or maybe the edge of a sleeve. I gave her that bracelet. She never took it off, not once. Rachel closed her eyes. I'm so sorry. I can't say more just yet, but I wanted you to hear it from me. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up. Later that evening, Rachel drove the long way home, not ready to sit still. Trooper lay in the back seat, tired but alert. His ears perked whenever Rachel slowed down or turned unexpectedly, as if ready to leap back into action. She found herself driving through Evan Cole's neighborhood again. The truck parked in the same spot, the house lights off. Everything looked normal. Too normal. She parked a block away, just out of sight, and waited. It was almost 10 p.m. when the front door opened. Evan stepped out, jacket zipped, cap pulled low. He carried a black duffel bag and moved quickly, glancing over his shoulder before tossing it into the bed of his truck. Rachel sat up straighter. He got in and drove off. Rachel followed, headlights off, keeping a safe distance. She called it in to dispatch as an off-duty observation, just in case things went sideways. Evan didn't go to the store. He didn't stop for gas. He drove straight out of town and down a gravel road that led toward the old quarry, an abandoned site fenced off years ago after a landslide made it unsafe. Nobody had any business being out there. Rachel pulled over before the fence and watched from a distance as Evan parked near a rusted-out utility shed and killed his lights. She waited 5 full minutes before stepping out of her SUV, Trooper close beside her. They moved through the brush slowly, careful not to snap twigs or rustle branches. From 30 feet out, Rachel could see Evan opening the shed. He pulled something from the duffel bag. It was shovel-shaped. Her stomach twisted. She raised her phone and snapped 3 quick photos, just in case. Then she whispered, "Stay," to Trooper, who obeyed, though she saw his muscles tense with instinct. Rachel stepped forward, her flashlight in one hand, the other on her holstered pistol. "Evan Cole, this is Officer Rachel Morgan. Step away from the shed." He spun around, panicked. For a second, it looked like he might run, but instead he raised both hands slowly. "What the hell are you doing out here?" she demanded, approaching with caution. "I was just dumping old junk," he said too quickly. "Tools and stuff? At 10 o'clock at night?" He swallowed. Didn't want to wake the neighbors. Rachel narrowed her eyes, gesturing to the bag. "Open it, slowly." He hesitated, then unzipped it. Inside were gloves, bleach, a small crowbar, and several heavy-duty trash bags. Rachel felt her heart sink. "What's under the tarp in the shed?" she asked. Nothing, just stuff." "Step back." She moved to the shed and yanked the tarp. Underneath was a shovel, still muddy, a half-buried bucket, and a set of boots that matched the tread marks from April's missing scene. Evan ran. Rachel shouted, "Stop!" and took off after him. Trooper, released from his hold, bolted through the brush like a missile, catching up to Evan in seconds. He didn't bite. He just blocked, barking loud and fierce, herding him back toward Rachel like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Evan tripped and fell hard. Rachel caught up, cuffs ready. "You're done running, Evan." Back at the station, Evan Cole sat handcuffed in interview room B, refusing to speak without a lawyer. But it didn't matter. Between the hoodie, The bracelet, the buried photo, the bleach kit, and now the forensic match to April's blood. Rachel had enough. It wouldn't bring April back, but it would give her parents something they'd lost for nearly a year. Answers. As dawn broke over the quiet town, Rachel sat outside the precinct with Trooper beside her, both watching the sun rise like they hadn't earned it. But maybe now they had. She scratched behind his ears. You knew. You always knew. Trooper looked up at her with those old, wise eyes. Rachel smiled. Let's go home. Rachel sat across from Evan Cole, arms crossed, jaw tight. The interrogation room was silent except for the hum of the overhead light and the distant echo of phones ringing at the front desk. Evan looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, a twitch in his left cheek, fingers trembling. He wasn't talking. Not a word since they brought him in. Not after the shed, not after the bleach, not even after they showed him April Jensen's blood on the hoodie. His lawyer, a smarmy guy in a rumpled suit named Kendall Hume, had instructed him to remain silent, and Evan was doing just that. But Rachel wasn't ready to walk out. You think silence keeps you safe? She said, voice low and steady. You think you can shut the world out just because you're scared of what comes next? Evan didn't even blink. Rachel stood, walked to the wall, and slapped down the photo. The one they found in the box Trooper dug up. Half a photo, half a face. Where's the other half, Evan? Still nothing. Rachel leaned closer. We know that's April. We know the bracelet belonged to her, and we know you kept this. We just don't know what you kept it for. Evan looked up slowly, and in that moment, for the first time, Rachel saw it. Guilt, raw, unfiltered, heavy, but still no words. Out in the hallway, Rachel leaned against the wall outside the room, exhaling hard. Trooper lay at her feet, head resting on his paws. Captain Murphy approached with a manila folder in hand. We finally got a hit, he said. Rachel looked up. On what? The print on the glove Trooper found. It wasn't Evan's. Rachel stood straighter. Then who? Murphy opened the folder. Name's Tyrell Madsen. Rap sheet out of Ohio. Petty theft, assault, served time for aggravated stalking. Last known address was in Cleveland. Moved to our area around the same time April went missing. Guess who he listed as his employer? Rachel already knew the answer. Cole Industrial Laundry. Murphy nodded. He worked there. Same shift as Evan, same week April disappeared. Rachel's gut twisted. All this time, she'd thought Evan was the monster. But what if he wasn't? What if he was the one who'd been manipulated, or coerced? Or worse, too scared to speak up. Rachel took the new information and returned to the interview room. She didn't bother with the chair this time. She dropped Tyrell Madsen's mugshot on the table in front of Evan. Recognize him? Evan glanced, froze. That was all the confirmation Rachel needed. He worked with you. You lied about being alone on shift that night. Why? Still, silence. Rachel walked around the table slowly. You didn't kill her, did you? Evan's jaw clenched, but his eyes welled just slightly. You saw something. Maybe helped hide something. Maybe you were scared. Maybe you thought if you stayed quiet, it would go away. She pointed at the photo. You kept this. Not because you were proud, but because you couldn't let her disappear completely. Evan trembled. His mouth opened, then closed again. Rachel leaned in. Where's the other half, Evan? That night, she drove home with more questions than answers. Trooper rested in the passenger seat, ears perked slightly, sensing her mood the way he always did. She scratched behind his neck, whispering, We're not done yet, buddy. She pulled into her driveway just after midnight and barely made it inside before her phone rang. It was dispatch. Officer Morgan, you might want to hear this. Local tow company just flagged a red pickup registered to Evan Cole, abandoned behind the old feed store off Route 17, back window smashed. Rachel grabbed her keys and turned right back around. The feed store had been shut down for years, a rusting shell of a building surrounded by tall grass and old fencing. The red truck was parked behind it, half hidden by overgrowth. Rachel shined her flashlight through the broken window. Blood. A smear on the passenger seat. A trail leading out. Trooper growled low in the back seat. She unlatched his door. Let's see where he went. Trooper hit the ground running, nose to the earth, tail high. He darted toward the back of the lot, weaving through weeds and broken glass. Rachel followed, flashlight beam bouncing. He stopped at a patch of disturbed dirt. Rachel knelt. No body, not this time. But buried under a thin layer of leaves and soil was the other half of the photo. The torn half. The half that showed a young man in a gray hoodie standing close to April, arm around her shoulder. It wasn't Evan. It was Tyrell Madsen. Rachel filed the photo as evidence and called Murphy. I think Evan's been covering for someone else this entire time. Murphy sighed. You think he helped move the body? Rachel shook her head, though he couldn't see it. I think he helped hide the photo, maybe the bracelet. But I think he was too afraid to stop Tyrell, or maybe too ashamed. Murphy lowered his voice. And you think Tyrell's still in town? Rachel opened her laptop and pulled up Tyrell's work record. He clocked out the day after April disappeared. Never came back, but no forwarding address, no family contact, just disappeared. The next few days were a blur. Rachel got a search warrant for Tyrell's last known residence, a low-rent duplex 5 miles out. Dust covered everything. The fridge still had milk that expired 10 months ago, a mattress on the floor, a drawer full of knives, and in the closet, clothing that matched April's last sighting report. A black cap, worn sneakers, and a gray hoodie. The same kind. Rachel dropped onto the curb outside the duplex, running her hands over her face. Trooper sat beside her, nudging her elbow gently. She smiled tiredly. I know, you told me. They sat in silence, the weight of the case pressing against the air like humidity before a storm. Then Rachel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. The voice was male, gravelly, tight with fear. I heard you're digging up things that should have stayed buried. Rachel froze. Who is this? You don't want to know, but you're making a mistake. Tyrell? Silence. I'm coming for you, she said quietly. The line went dead. Rachel sat in her SUV long after the call ended. She stared out the windshield, processing every word, every clue, every piece of instinct screaming at her to move. This wasn't just about April anymore. This was about fear, control, and the sick kind of silence that lets predators vanish when no one is watching. But she was watching now, and so was Trooper. That night, back at home, Rachel poured a drink and stood on the back porch. Trooper lay beside her, eyes half closed, chest rising and falling slow and steady. She looked out over the quiet town. How many others had kept quiet? How many people had looked away because they didn't want to get involved? April deserved more than that. She deserved justice, and Rachel would tear the town apart piece by piece if that's what it took to bring it. She knelt and rubbed Trooper's fur. Tomorrow we started with the laundry plant. He lifted his head slightly, tail tapping the deck. She smiled. Yeah, I know. You already knew that. The old coal industrial laundry plant stood like a forgotten monument on the edge of town. It used to churn out thousands of pounds of linens every day, hotel sheets, hospital scrubs, factory uniforms. But after a fire in the back wing 2 years ago and a half-hearted attempt at renovation, the company had scaled back, moved most operations out of state. Now, only a skeleton crew remained. The loading dock creaked. The siding peeled. A single fluorescent light flickered above the security gate. Rachel stood just outside the entrance, her cruiser parked behind her. Trooper sat alert in the front seat, eyes trained on the front doors like he was already working the case in his head. She exhaled slowly. The wind tugged at her jacket. This was it. She hadn't been able to sleep since the call, the voice warning her to stop digging, to let it lie. But she wasn't wired that way. Never had been. Rachel pushed open the side gate and entered the main warehouse. The air inside was damp and stale. The lights buzzed overhead. Machinery sat dormant, like rusted bones in a forgotten graveyard. The hum of dryers and the stink of bleach were long gone, replaced by silence and the faint whiff of mildew. She stepped cautiously, flashlight cutting through the dimness. The back hallway, the one leading to the old locker rooms and storage closet, was where Evan Cole had clocked in the night April went missing, and it was where Tyrell Madsen had been stationed before he vanished without a trace. Rachel had a search warrant in her pocket, but no backup yet. Just her, a sidearm, and a dog that knew the smell of guilt better than most humans. She opened the back door and whistled softly. Trooper leapt down and joined her silently, his steps steady, ears up. She knelt. Easy, buddy, show me. Trooper moved fast but deliberate, nose low, weaving past overturned carts and broken shelving. His tail went stiff. He paused by a rusted door, then began scratching. 3 sharp scrapes, followed by a low growl. Rachel froze. This wasn't random. Trooper didn't scratch without reason. She approached the door and shone her light over the frame. The paint had bubbled from old heat, fire damage. She tried the handle. Locked. But it gave just enough with a hard shove. The room was small, maybe 10 by 10. Concrete floor, molded walls, a pile of burned rags in one corner. Rachel stepped inside, her boots crunching something brittle. She looked down. Charred paper, ashes. Trooper sniffed the pile, then turned toward the back wall and growled again. This time deeper, more insistent. He dug his front paws at a specific spot, kicking up dust and grime. Rachel crouched. The floor was uneven, a loose panel. She pried at it with her knife until it gave way. Beneath it was a plastic container, sealed and wrapped in duct tape. Her heart pounded. She peeled it open and found what no one wanted to believe still existed. A tattered journal, a labeled vial of blood, and a necklace. A tiny pendant in the shape of a heart. Rachel swallowed. April's mother had described that necklace in her first interview, a little silver heart with a rose etched on the front. Her father gave it to her when she turned 13. It had never been found, until now. Rachel called it in. Murphy arrived 20 minutes later with 2 detectives and an evidence team. Trooper stayed close to Rachel, watching the bustle of activity without flinching. "We need to find Tyrell," Murphy said, eyes dark. "Now." Rachel nodded. "I think he's still nearby. He made that call. He's watching." Murphy ran a hand through his hair. "We're putting out a bolo. His face is going on every bulletin board in the Tri-County area." Rachel didn't wait. She pulled up April's case files again. Every address, every work site, every friend or family contact tied to Tyrell. And one name stuck out. Rita Madsen, a cousin, lived off a dirt road north of town, never interviewed. She hadn't been listed as a primary contact. But sometimes the quiet ones were the ones people went to when they were trying not to be found. Rachel drove out before the sun set. The road to Rita's place was unpaved and barely marked. A crooked mailbox sat at the entrance, half buried under vines. The house was small, faded yellow siding with a rusted-out pickup parked beside the porch. No lights inside. Rachel parked 2 houses away and approached on foot. Trooper stayed close, every step measured. As they neared the back fence, Rachel heard movement, barely audible. A creak of wood, a whisper of steps. She froze, and then, behind the shed, she saw him. Tyrell Madsen. He was thinner than his mugshot, hair longer, wearing a camo jacket, hood up. He saw her and ran. "Stop!" Rachel yelled, bolting forward. Tyrell cut through the yard, crashing through brush, ducking under tree limbs. Rachel followed, her breath sharp, legs pumping. "Trooper, go!" The dog surged ahead, bounding like a missile through the undergrowth. Within seconds, he'd overtaken Tyrell, cutting him off. Tyrell swung a branch, but Trooper dodged, barking furiously. Rachel caught up, sidearm drawn. "Don't move! Hands where I can see them!" Tyrell froze, panting hard. "You don't get it!" he rasped. "You weren't there!" "I don't care where you were," Rachel said coldly. "I care about April Jensen, and you're going to tell me what happened." He dropped to his knees, hands up. "I didn't mean to kill her." The confession came in fits and starts. He'd followed April for weeks. Watched her. Waited. Told himself it wasn't wrong, just curiosity. Just obsession. He approached her behind the gas station that night. Things escalated. She fought back. He panicked. He choked her. She died. He hid the body, burned some of her belongings, buried others. And when Evan found out, too late. He threatened to go to the police, so Tyrell made him help cover it up. "He's not like me," Tyrell said, eyes wet. He didn't want any part of it. Rachel stared at him, but he never told anyone. Tyrell shrugged. "Fear makes people do stupid things." Back at the station, Rachel sat with April's parents. She didn't show them everything, just the pendant. Mrs. Jensen broke into tears, clutching it to her chest like it was a piece of her daughter's soul. Mr. Jensen placed a trembling hand on Rachel's arm. "Thank you for not giving up on her." Rachel nodded, throat tight. Trooper's the one who wouldn't let it go. The mayor called 2 hours later, asking for a press statement. Rachel gave a brief one, refusing to take the spotlight. Instead, she made a request. That Trooper, retired or not, be recognized for his service. A week later, they held the ceremony at City Hall. Trooper wore his old K-9 badge, freshly polished. The crowd stood as the mayor pinned a new medal to his collar for valor, instinct, and service beyond duty. Rachel knelt beside him as the cameras flashed. The old dog didn't understand the attention, but he understood her voice. "You brought April home," she whispered. "You did it, partner." Spring came late that year. The snow had barely melted when the first dogwood trees bloomed near the town square. Rachel Morgan stood by the courthouse steps in her dress uniform, her badge polished to a shine, but her mind somewhere else, still stuck between what was lost and what was finally found. At her side sat Trooper, wearing his old vest with the freshly awarded medal glinting on his collar. His ears twitched at the crowd noise, but he didn't move. He was older now, his pace slower, his breathing heavier, but his presence carried the same weight it always had. Rachel looked down at him and smiled. "You ready for this, partner?" Trooper flicked his tail once. That was all the answer she needed. The town had turned out in full. Local reporters, city officials, school teachers, even kids with handmade "Thank you, Trooper" signs. It wasn't every day a retired K-9 helped close a 9-month-old murder case and bring closure to a grieving family. Rachel hadn't asked for any of it, but for April's parents, it meant the world. Mayor Carson stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we honor a four-legged hero whose instincts, courage, and unwavering loyalty cracked open a case we feared would never be solved. Without Trooper and the relentless determination of Officer Rachel Morgan, justice for April Jensen might have never come." Applause erupted. Rachel knelt beside Trooper, gently resting her hand on his back as the mayor continued. He wasn't doing this for medals or speeches. He never had. Trooper just couldn't let it go. After the ceremony, Rachel and Trooper walked through the park, the same park where it all started. The trash can was still there, cleaned up now, fresh paint, flowers planted nearby. A small plaque beneath the bench read, "For April, you are never forgotten." Rachel stood silently, hand resting on Trooper's head. She remembered the moment like it happened yesterday, how he'd clawed at that can, growling at something no one else could see, pointing to a truth that had been buried for months. And she had almost ignored it. "Thanks for being stubborn," she whispered. He leaned into her touch. The days that followed were quieter. Tyrell Madsen had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and evidence tampering. His confession, along with physical evidence and the journal, left little room for doubt. He'd be behind bars for decades. Evan Cole, after cooperating fully, was given a lighter sentence, accessory after the fact, but was also ordered to attend mandatory counseling and public restitution. April's remains were buried near her family's home. Hundreds attended the service. Rachel sat in the back row, hand resting on Trooper's collar. She didn't speak. She just listened. The community was healing, slowly, unevenly, but healing. Weeks later, Rachel took Trooper for a long drive, out past the edge of town, toward the hills where the air smelled like pine and freedom. She parked by a quiet trail, pulled out a blanket and a thermos of coffee, and let him roam off-leash. He didn't go far. Even now, even retired, even older, Trooper stayed close. He sniffed a few rocks, trotted down to a small stream, barked once at a squirrel, then sat down beside her and watched the world go by. Rachel took a sip of coffee and breathed deep. "I've been thinking," she said, looking out at the water. "You ever notice how everyone kept saying it was a cold case?" She glanced at him. "But it wasn't cold to you, was it?" His ears twitched. Rachel smiled. "You knew all along? Something just didn't smell right, and you couldn't let go." That thought hit her hard. She stared out at the trees and let the silence settle between them like old friends. Some people spend their whole careers waiting for closure on one case, one family, one child. Trooper brought it home with a scratch at a trash can. That summer, Rachel took a new position, K-9 liaison for the county, mentoring younger officers and their dogs, helping train both in instinct-based tracking, not just obedience. She spoke at schools. She visited community centers. And always, Trooper was with her, until the day he wasn't. It was a Tuesday morning when Rachel noticed he didn't come to the door for breakfast. He usually waited by the fridge, tail wagging, tongue hanging, watching her scramble eggs and sneak him a piece of bacon. But that morning, silence. She found him curled up under the willow tree in the backyard. The sunlight dappled through the leaves, his head resting on a patch of clover. Still, peaceful, gone. Rachel knelt beside him and pressed her forehead to his neck. She didn't cry right away. She just sat there, running her hand through his fur, whispering all the things she never said aloud. "You saved her. You saved me." They held a memorial a week later. Not many dogs get a full procession, but Trooper wasn't just any dog. Retired officers came from across the state. Students brought hand-drawn cards. A boy with autism who Trooper had once comforted at a school event placed a stuffed squirrel on his casket. The mayor read a statement. Rachel gave none. She stood in uniform, straight-backed, with tears in her eyes and a hand on the folded flag that bore Trooper's name. And in her other hand, she held the very first badge he ever wore. Months passed. Life moved on. But sometimes, when Rachel walked past the park on a quiet morning, she'd pause near the trash can. She could still hear it. The sound of paws scratching, the low warning bark, the way Trooper stood tall and unshaken. She'd close her eyes and smile. Some dogs never retire. Thank you for following this story to the very end. If Trooper's journey touched you, we hope you'll share it with someone who believes in the power of loyalty, instinct, and quiet heroes. Now we'd love to hear from you. Do you believe dogs can sense things we can't? Have you ever experienced something like that yourself? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more true stories that celebrate the bond between humans and the animals who protect, heal, and save us.